Hello, and thank you for joining me today. My name is Janice Cross Gilliard, and I'm the family genealogist for both sides of my family. I feel blessed and honored to share a small segment of my genealogy journey with you, and I'm also thankful that RootsTech 2021 provided this opportunity. What genealogy brick wall? After researching my family history for over 20 years, I can assure you that you will experience moments of highs and lows while conducting your research. It is my hope that my story will inspire, challenge, and empower you. With your research, it should be done in an organized, detailed, and intentional way to ensure quality research past the 1870 census records. Note, there is no magic wand that you can wave and all of a sudden your family history is laid out for you unless there was someone in your family who has already done the work, and that is not my story. With African American genealogy, I've heard so many times that it's impossible to get past the 1870 so-called brick wall. It's not true. You may also believe that enslaved people were not listed on slave schedules. Also not true in some instances. And I'll share proof with you in a moment. Before I started my research, I thought it was impossible too. Repeat after me. It is possible to find my enslaved ancestors. I will discover who they are. Once I discover them, I will tell the stories and everything I have learned about them. As you will see, it is not impossible. Records for our ancestors do exist. I'll never forget thinking when I started this journey that it was going to be so difficult. It may be challenging, but it can be done. This journey starts with you. If you've done basic genealogy research, awesome. If not, get started as soon as possible. You won't regret it. Involve your family, especially our youth. Please enter your information into a genealogy program. Keep your documents organized. You'll thank me later. You will be amazed at what you discover about your family. Yes, the good, the bad, and well, whatever category. I was stunned to discover that I had ancestors who founded universities, attended historically Black colleges, as well as obtaining master's degrees from Harvard University. And here are some examples here. What's next? Check out all of the available census records for your family. I used FamilySearch.org and Ancestry.com. As you discover information about your own family using the census records, always check 10 pages before and 10 pages after the census records. Neighbors, friends, and family are there. Also, who are the white families living near your family? You may discover that the people who enslaved your family may now be neighbors. Some formerly enslaved people remained in the area, and well, some were like, see ya. If you happen to discover the enslaver / plantation owner, please research everything you can about their families, especially their wills. As you are building your family tree, please be sure to include any images or notes you may discover along the way. You want to be able to prepare a narrative for your family. You may gather all the names you want, but it is so important to tell their stories. And listed below, I have an example of my great-grandfather in the 1870 census record. Note that enslaved people were considered property. So you want to research the following: wills, inventories, probate records, tax lists, deeds. Excellent additional sources are free Negro registers, Civil War documents, marriage bonds and cohabitation records, United States Freedmen's Bank records. Visit the archives for the area if you can. If not, submit a research request online. Many of them will assist you and respond. Earlier, I listed Civil War records. Personally, before I started my research, I'm being honest, I thought I would never find anything. Well, I have found several. And I also found Freedman's bank records as well. And here are some examples. Two of them, one for Granville, born in 1819, and one for Robert Bowler, born in 1833. The information is there. You just have to keep looking. The 1860 slave schedule. Remember I said that sometimes they're not listed, and in most cases they're not. But it's worth it to pay attention and go through for the area that your ancestors were enslaved in, because you may find a surprise as I did. And this is an example of my enslaved ancestors being listed in the 1860 slave schedule. First and last names. Be sure to check the census records for your state. Here's an example of an 1869 census return out of Marion County, South Carolina. And who's listed? My second great-grandfather, born in 1845, Stuart Smith. Earlier, I spoke about Civil War records. And here's an example to the left of one of my ancestors, Spencer Cox. I actually have his pension file, and it's 150 pages, and it talks about his wife and where he fought and how long it took him to get his pension. I also suggested looking at marriage records. So a lot of times folks think that our marriages or our ancestors' marriages were not listed. That's not true. Oh, there aren't any marriage records for our ancestors that far back? Let's correct the narrative. This record is from May 1866 in North Carolina. Keep looking. The ancestors are waiting to surprise you in the historical records. Following is another marriage record for two of my ancestors, Stephen Ward and Mahala Albritton, confirming that said cohabitation began in March of 1839. Did you hear me? March of 1839 in North Carolina. Keep searching. Again, your record should consist of more than names. Everyone, and I mean everyone, you all have that one relative that keeps obituaries. And for me, it's my Aunt Ruby, and she has allowed me access. So I said, the next time I visit, I'm going to bring a scanner with me and scan them. Look at the newspaper articles as well. Many times we think that our folks aren't there. Trust me, there was something that was done, or a marriage, or a church record, or something important where our family was there, or maybe not so important. Maybe they did something that they shouldn't have done. But we are so included in newspaper articles. Stories written by family members, letters, and journals. You won't know if you don't ask. You would be surprised at what your family has. I know I was. Also, family reunion booklets. And if no one in your family has ever done a family reunion booklet, or a booklet just about your family and the basic history that you do know as you are researching, you be the one to prepare one. And to the right is an obituary for my grandmother. She passed away in 2019, and this is my grandmother on my maternal side. Location, location, location. Make it your mission to learn about the area and what was happening in the community that your ancestors lived in. The history of the area is a shared history. And many times we assume that we weren't included, or trust me, you would be surprised. I found so many documents that where we are included, our names and what role we played in various events. So here's an example. President George Washington visited two plantations that my ancestors were enslaved on and wrote about it in a diary during his Southern tour. One in South Carolina, one plantation, and another plantation in North Carolina. And these are historical markers. Travel. Travel where? State archives and local libraries. Please be clear about your research. Prepare before you go. Most librarians, they want to assist you, but they are not there to do all of the work for you. You don't want them to go to lunch, and it's like, well, where are they? Or to take an extra long bathroom break. Some of my research trips include visits to Charleston, Columbia, Florence, Marion, Mullins, and Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. My next trips, I want them to be North Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, and Africa. Genealogy support. Join a local or national genealogy group or lineage society. Visit your local historical society. Recruit and involve family members, especially our youth. Network with other family historians. I belong to the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society in New Jersey. I'm also a charter member of the Sons and Daughters of the United States Middle Passage. I've gleaned so much useful information from both organizations. Following are links. Assistance is available. Look at wills. That was one of the first things on our list. And this particular will was for Benjamin Gause Sr. out of South Carolina, and also probate records. And here it's a transcript of the will for Benjamin Gause, but it details information, with his will, who he's leaving everybody to, and lo and behold, who's listed? One of my ancestors, and his name was Gabriel Caesar. Connections. Over 20 years ago, I asked my paternal grandmother, her name is Mrs. Celia Woodberry Cross, if she knew her grandparents. And she responded with, "Of course I do." And here she's, in a picture with my daughter, and the second picture with all three of my children. And then the bottom picture is on her 95th birthday. I thank God for my grandmother. She shared so much information with me that was very instrumental. Again, speak to your elders. What I didn't expect to find was a slave narrative for her grandmother. She is referred to by family and in documents as Jenny, with a G-I-N-N-Y, also J-E-N-N-Y, Genia, and Mom Genia. It is my belief that my second great grandmother wanted me to find her. Please note that the slave narrative for my Jenny is noted in over 100 books, including the book, The Price for Their Pound of Flesh, The Value of the Enslaved, From Womb to Grave, and The Building of a Nation by Dana Rainey Berry. And so the slave narratives. As historical sources, slave narratives document slave life primarily in the American South from the invaluable perspective of firsthand experience. And this is the cover page of the slave narrative for my second great grandmother. Looking at wills and the slave narrative allowed me to add additional generations to my family tree. And so at the very bottom where you see the black bar, there's my grandmother, and she is 97. Her birthday's on the 4th of July. And then if you look at the top, are Gabriel Caesar and Mary Gause. Also, death certificates are excellent resources. And this death certificate actually confirmed Jenny's parents, or Eugenia's parents. And they are Gade or Gabriel Caesar. And if you look again at the bottom there, Mary Caesar. So it was nice to be able to have more than one document. One where she talks about being enslaved, also her father being listed in the will, and now the death certificate confirming all of that information. Notes from the narrative. So with the slave narrative that was done, I sat one day and took approximately 3 hours to just take my time and go through, especially since she was speaking in a Gullah dialect. And so I prepared 2 pages, and it's note from the narratives that she was born on the plantation of Ben Gause, that she nursed his children, that she noted that Miss Susan was good to her, that her parents were listed, Gabriel, that there were 200 slaves there, that there was a smokehouse and barn full of corn, that she described the food, meat, molasses, and corn. And what I thought was interesting, because we had this as children as well, they had the Sunday clothes and attended Old Neck Church. The seats for the free people were blue, and the seats for, and I remember this from my notes, for the enslaved people were yellow, which I found to be very interesting. It also noted that the slave owners had a big carriage with 2 big white horses, and Eugenia traveled with them as she cared for their children. So I got all kinds of visuals for that. She talked about her grandmother. So here it is. This is my second great grandmother, and my second great grandmother is talking about her grandmother, Phoebe. She's mentioned as churning milk and saving the clabber milk for the enslaved children. She is also referenced as being bought when Ben Goss died, and that a buyer wanted to examine her teeth and she refused. I love it. She lists her aunts, Stara, Tenna, and Cynthia. They worked in the big house. Aunt Hannah was the cook. Aunt Dicey cleaned. And all of these women are mentioned in that will that I referenced earlier. She talked about children sleeping on a piazza, a medicine book when they were sick that Massa would refer to. The overseer made sure they worked from sun up to sundown, and also that there was a loom house for weaving, a cotton gin, and a blacksmith shop. Notes for the narrative part 2. There was a reference to the Civil War, and that they hid everything, all of the valuables, they hid them. The other thing I found interesting was that they talked about an Indian camp being nearby and that they found arrowheads. And then that, I thought it was really funny where she said, no Yankees come nowhere about here until after freedom. So just the language, the dialect, and the detailed, I found to be very interesting, moving, and I experienced a range of emotions reading the narratives. This was my favorite. Eugenia gets married on the plantation of Jem Stevenson, and she talks about the timing that they married in March. She says that there was a cake that was baked and describes the food. And then one of the parts that was very heartwarming for me was where she describes her dress, that it was made out of white Swiss muslin. And I have to be honest with you, I didn't know what that was. So I looked it up and it was just like, wow. And that they danced and celebrated. And so I was happy about it as I was reading that. And then as I continued with the narrative, to realize that you're celebrating, you're having so much fun, that, you know, you married someone that you love and you care about, and then you go back to being enslaved. You won't go back, you know, that you are enslaved, that there are joyous moments, but then sad moments, knowing that you don't have freedom. I shared with you that it's important to talk to family and elders, and you never know what people have. So I spoke with my cousin, and she prepared a booklet, and she's been researching Eugenia as well. And so she shared this amazing story that I thought was so interesting, because here it is that this is our cousin Tom, who's a grandson of Eugenia. He lived with her. And I was like, wow, that must have been amazing. So here's one story that I just wanted to share real quick, where she's speaking with him, and he's describing that he and a cousin went and picked peaches from the peach tree before it was time, and how Grandma Jenny caught Uncle Tom and Jasper at the peach tree and said to them in a stern and authoritative voice, if I catch you all at that peach tree again, I'm going to beat green and right alike. So I found this so interesting and just gave me a glimpse into her personality, additional information about who she was and how firm she was. And they also talked about how loving, kind, and caring she was. This is another slave narrative that's connected to my family, Thomas Dixon. Thomas Dixon was the grandfather of Laura Cross Hall. Laura Cross Hall's father is my great-grandfather, Edward W. Cross. His first wife was Thomasina Dixon, and then he moved to Marion, South Carolina after living in Columbia, and I'm not quite sure what happened, and married my grandmother, my great-grandmother, and had 10 kids. And so I did research to find the first family. It took me approximately 13 years, but I did find descendants of that first family, and we've had several reunions. So your documentation can lead you to other family members that you may not know about, and other surprises. But back to this slave narrative, Thomas Dixon talks about the earthquake that occurred, the greater earthquake in South Carolina. He talks about being the first group of students that attended Benedict College, a historically Black college in South Carolina. He talks about being married twice, that his first wife died, and that her 2 children died in a fire. He describes his children, where they moved, who they married. And so there was so much information that allowed me to expand on my tree. And recently, I did a DNA test with ancestry.com, and it solved more mysteries, but that's a different presentation. So let's continue. Travel reflections. All of your research trips will fit into the stories you share. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that the locations that I traveled to and doing my research would be so significant. And we'll get to that in a moment. One of them was the Slave Mart in Charleston, South Carolina, an original slave cabin in Florence, South Carolina at Francis Marion University, the Records Building in Marion, South Carolina. Sometimes they find you. So I'll never view the 4th of July in the same way. My last example is the discovery of my 5th great grandmother. My grandmother was born on this day in 1923, the 4th of July. I called to wish her a happy birthday, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, my aunt starts sharing about family members in Pennsylvania that I didn't know anything about. So here's the short version. She shared about one. I looked him up on ancestry.com, and that's when I discovered Queen Willoughby. Listen, she was born in 1812, sold in 1829 for $335, and lived in Marion, South Carolina. I decided to learn as much as I could about her, and wait for it, PBS, the History Detectives show, did an entire segment about her life in 2012. Not only that, several years ago, I had this urge to go to Charleston, South Carolina, and could not explain why. My family did not want to go, so I went with cousins. We visited the Slave Mart, and I had this overwhelming feeling of, she came to see us today, and it was a peaceful feeling. I never told anyone until I found out that Willoughby was sold there in 1829 for $335, which I just shared. That's why it's important to travel. Next, in the PBS segment, Joseph McGill from the Slave Dwelling Project was at Francis Marion University in the segment at the slave cabins. And I had just communicated with him on Facebook Live before I called my grandmother. Here's another part. The segment ends at the Records Building in Marion, South Carolina, with an archivist, Maxie Boxworth. I know him, and he's assisted me with my research in the past. Finding out about Willoughby has changed my life and encouraged me to keep doing the work. She was honored in 2013 by the Daughters of the American Revolution. And here's the brochure here, and also a brief description that was included in the brochure about her life. So, I hope my session has encouraged you to do the work. Dr. Evelyn McDowell of Sons and Daughters of the United States Middle Passage always says, this work is spiritual. And you know what? I'm a witness that it is. I wish you success in your genealogy journey. And I just want to share some additional slides with you. Follow the money. This is the slave bill of sale for my 5th great grandmother, sold in 1812. And also in 1829. And in 1829, it was for $335. So that's why I refer to her as Queen Willoughby. She survived and she overcame, and I'm here because of that. This describes where Willoughby was allowed to work and she made money. Now that's listed here, and the majority of the people that are listed here and the amount of the money that they made, they're actually connected to me. Share with the next generation. All of these children are so dear to me, and it's one of the reasons why I do what I do. It took me 25 years to find most of the information that I have. It will not be the case for them. And I close with this. Morning light, silken dream, take flight. As the darkness gives way to the dawn, You've survived. Now your moment has arrived. Now your dream has finally been born. Doing this work for the generations coming behind us. Thank you so much for your time. Be determined, never give up. Seek out your ancestors. They're waiting to be discovered.